My fiancée said during dinner in Rome. I think I need a different life than the one we planned. I raised my glass, wished her happiness, canceled our wedding the next morning, booked a one-way flight home, and watched distance rewrite everything we once promised. I think I need a different life than the one we planned. She said it quietly, like she was commenting on the weather outside, or deciding she didn't want the second glass of wine. Like 7 years of us could be folded neatly at the corner and set aside on the tablecloth. I remember the sound of the restaurant around us, the low clinking of cutlery, an Italian couple laughing 2 tables over, someone's chair scraping against stone floor. Rome was doing what Rome always does. It was just being beautiful, completely indifferent to what was falling apart inside it. I looked at her across the candles. Her eyes were steady, not glassy with tears, not flickering with doubt. Just steady, like she had rehearsed this moment, maybe more than once, maybe 100 times on the flight over. I picked up my wine glass. The red caught the candlelight and held it. Then I wish you exactly that, I said. And I meant it. Every single word. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. We were supposed to get married in 11 weeks. I was 31, she was 29, and we had been building something together since the year I still thought I knew how the next decade of my life would go. The ring on her finger had taken me 4 months of deliberate saving. Not because I couldn't afford it sooner, but because I wanted to choose it without any financial pressure clouding my judgment. I wanted to be sure. About everything. Her name was Mia, and I had been sure about her for a long time. The trip to Rome had been my idea. A pre-wedding getaway, just the 2 of us, before the chaos of vendors and family dinners and seating charts swallowed the next 2 months whole. I wanted one last quiet stretch of just us, before us became something larger and louder and permanently witnessed. I had booked the same hotel where her parents had stayed on their honeymoon. She had told me that story once, offhand, and I had filed it away like I filed away all the things that mattered to her. I thought it would mean something to her. I was right, just not in the way I expected. The first 2 days in Rome were everything I had imagined. We walked through the Forum in the early morning before the tourist crowds arrived, and she took my hand without thinking about it, the way she always did when something made her feel small in a good way. We ate carbonara standing up at a counter in Trastevere because the place only had 4 seats, and they were all taken. We argued cheerfully about whether the Pantheon was more impressive inside or outside, and I let her win even though I was right. She was radiant. That is the only word for it. There are people who travel well, who seem to expand when they are taken out of their ordinary context, and Mia was one of them. She laughed more. She moved differently. Rome brought out a version of her that I had first fallen in love with years ago, a version I had watched slowly get covered over by commutes and deadlines and the ordinary friction of shared life. I was happy, genuinely, deeply happy. The kind of happy that doesn't announce itself. It just settles in your chest and stays. I remember thinking, on the second evening as we walked back to the hotel along the river, that I had made the right choice. That she was the right person. That the wedding in 11 weeks was not a formality. It was a confirmation. I remember thinking that. The third day, something shifted. I almost didn't notice it. We went to the Vatican in the morning, stood in line for 40 minutes, moved through the corridors and rooms, and eventually stood beneath the Sistine Chapel, ceiling with our heads tilted back. She was quiet. Not the good quiet, not the reverent quiet that the place deserves. A different quiet. The kind that lives just behind someone's eyes when they are somewhere else entirely, even though their body is standing right next to you. I asked her if she was all right. She said yes. She smiled. And it was a real smile, mostly, but with something underneath that I couldn't name. We had lunch near the Castel Sant'Angelo, and she was fine, normal, present. She asked me questions about a walking tour brochure she picked up. She ordered in her stumbling, charming Italian and made the waiter laugh. I told myself I had imagined the morning. I was good at telling myself things were fine. I realize now, been practicing that particular skill for longer than I wanted to admit. The restaurant on the third night was my favorite of the trip. Small, tucked into a side street off the Piazza Navona, the kind of place that has no website and no photos online, and you only find it because a stranger at a coffee bar tells you about it with the private pride of someone sharing a secret. Exposed stone walls, low ceiling, candles and old wine bottles. The menu was handwritten and changed daily. I had made the reservation 2 weeks before we left. We were seated at a corner table, and the waiter brought us a complimentary Aperol spritz without being asked, and Mia said it was the most Italian thing that had ever happened to her. And for a while, it was perfect. We talked about the wedding. Not the logistics, not the vendor questions, just the actual thing, the fact of it, what it meant. I told her I kept thinking about the moment I would see her walk down the aisle, that I had played it in my mind so many times it already felt like a memory. She smiled. She reached across the table and touched my hand. And then she went quiet again. The food came. We ate. The wine was exactly right. And then, somewhere between the secondo and the dessert menu, she set down her fork, folded her hands on the table, looked at me with those steady eyes, and said it. I think I need a different life than the one we planned. I didn't react. Not immediately. I sat with it for a moment the way you sit with pain when you first feel it, before your body decides how serious it is. Walk me through that, I said. She took a breath. I've been feeling it for a while. This restlessness. Like something is supposed to happen before I settle. Like there's a version of my life that I haven't lived yet. And if I get married right now, I'll close the door on it permanently and spend the rest of my life wondering. What version? I asked. She shook her head slightly. I don't know exactly. That's the honest answer. I just know that lately, when I imagine our wedding day, I feel pressure, not excitement, not the butterflies I'm supposed to feel, just this weight. I looked at the candle between us. How long has this been happening? She was quiet for a moment. Months, she said. Months. The word landed somewhere in my chest and stayed there. How many months, Mia? She looked down at the tablecloth. Since around Christmas. Christmas was 8 months ago. I picked up my wine glass. Slowly, deliberately, raised it slightly in her direction. Then I wish you exactly the life you need, I said. And I set the glass back down, and I did not cry, and I did not raise my voice, and I folded my napkin carefully on the table beside my plate. And that was the end of dinner. We walked back to the hotel without speaking. Not an angry silence. Not the silence of two people who have run out of things to say. The silence of two people who have said the one thing that changes everything, and now have to figure out how to exist in the 5 minutes before they reach a door and walk through it. She tried once, outside the hotel entrance. We don't have to make any decisions tonight. I looked at her. I think we already have, I said. The room was beautiful. We had splurged. I had splurged on something with a terrace overlooking the rooftops. There was a bottle of Prosecco the hotel had left for us as a welcome gift, still sitting on ice, untouched since we arrived because we kept going out and saving it for a special occasion. I looked at it when we walked in. Then I looked away. I slept on my side of the bed. She slept on hers. At some point in the night, I heard her crying quietly, and I stared at the ceiling, and I did not reach over, because I have always believed that some grief is private even between the people who caused it, and I wasn't sure whether reaching for her was something I had the right to do anymore. I lay there until 5 in the morning. Then I got up, made coffee from the little machine on the counter, took it out to the terrace, and sat in the dark with Rome spread out below me while I made the decisions I had already made. At 6:47 a.m., I emailed the wedding planner. I kept it brief. I told her that the wedding was canceled, that I would be in touch within the week regarding deposits and outstanding vendor payments, and I thanked her for her work. I called my mother at 7:15 a.m. Rome time, which was 1:15 a.m. back home. She answered on the third ring. She always answered when I called, no matter the time. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Are you all right?" I said, "I will be." She said, "Do you want me to start making calls to your side of the family?" I said, "Yes, please." She said, "Come home." 2 words. I booked the flight at 7:48 a.m. One way. Departing that evening. Mia was still asleep when I came back inside, or pretending to be. I showered, dressed, and packed quietly. I left her itinerary, both boarding passes for the return flight, and the hotel confirmation for the last 2 nights on the desk beside the window. I had booked those originally, so we could have time to ourselves after the excitement of arrival. Now they were just accommodation she would need. I put the hotel key card on top of the stack of papers. Then I sat on the edge of the bed. She opened her eyes. "You're leaving," she said. "Yes." She sat up. "You don't have to do this today. We could talk more." "Mia." I said her name once, gently. "You've been feeling this for 8 months. You didn't tell me. You let me plan and save and book and look forward to something that you already knew, somewhere, wasn't going to happen. I'm not angry about that. But I'm not going to sit in a hotel room in Rome and unknow what I now know. That's not something I can do." She had tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know," I said. "And I meant that too." I picked up my bag. I walked to the door. I stopped with my hand on the handle. I hope you find it, I said. The life you're looking for. I genuinely do. And then I walked out. The flight home was 6 hours. I sat in 14A and watched the Alps pass beneath the clouds, and I felt. And this is the part that surprised me most. I felt very little. Not the devastation I expected. Not the unraveling. Just a strange, wide-open emptiness. The kind that comes after something enormous, when your system hasn't fully registered it yet. I ordered a whiskey at 35,000 feet, which I almost never do. It tasted the way I needed it to. The man beside me fell asleep before we finished ascending. I watched a movie I won't be able to tell you the name of. I read 2 pages of a book and read them again without absorbing a single word. And then I just sat there, thinking, not about what had happened, about what had been happening for longer than I wanted to acknowledge. Because here is the thing about the truth, it doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives the way light enters a room when you gradually open a curtain, slowly, inch by inch, until suddenly the room is bright, and you realize it was actually dark in there for a very long time. Mia and I met at a gallery opening. Not a fancy one. A friend of a friend had a show at a small gallery in the arts district. The kind of show where the wine is in plastic cups, and everyone knows everyone else's name, and the conversation is better than the art. She was standing in front of a large abstract canvas with her head tilted slightly to the left, and she had this expression on her face like she was trying to have an honest argument with the painting. I went and stood next to her. "Does it help if you know the title?" I asked. She glanced at me. "What's the title?" "Number 7, I said. She laughed. And that was that. We talked for 3 hours that night. We exchanged numbers at the end of it, and she texted me before I had even made it back to my car. It said, "The painting was better than its name." I replied, "Most things are." First date was the following Thursday. We stayed at the restaurant until they started stacking chairs. By the second month, I was making excuses to drive through her neighborhood. By the fourth, I had stopped making excuses. She was the first person I had ever been with who made me feel simultaneously at ease and completely awake. Like I could relax into the conversation without ever being bored. Like every sentence she said had a slightly open ending, a door left ajar, and I always wanted to know what was on the other side. For the first 3 years, we were good. Not perfect. Good. Genuinely, fundamentally good. We fought the way healthy people fight, about specific things, not about each other in general. We disagreed on money, occasionally. We had different tolerances for social noise. She could go out 5 nights running and feel more energized than when she started. I needed at least 2 evenings at home per week, or I started fraying at the edges. We figured it out. We compromised in the ways that felt honest and held our lines on the things that weren't negotiable. I met her parents in year 2. Her father shook my hand and asked me 3 questions in quick succession: what I did, what I thought of his daughter, and what I planned to do with my life. I answered all 3 directly. He nodded. Her mother made pasta from scratch for dinner and told me I was welcome back anytime. I felt like I had passed something. I felt like I was being folded into something. It was a good feeling. The kind of feeling you want to keep. Year 4 was when things started, very quietly, to change. Not dramatically. Nothing you could point to. Just a slight cooling at the edges of things. She got a new job, a significant one, a promotion she had been working toward for nearly 2 years. I was proud of her. She deserved it absolutely. But the job came with a different schedule, different colleagues, a different rhythm. She started traveling for work. Not constantly, once a month or so, sometimes twice. Short trips. Nothing that should have mattered. But each time she came back, she was different in a way that was hard to name. More animated, maybe. More full of things she had seen and conversations she had had with people I didn't know. She would tell me about the trips, and I would listen. And I would be genuinely interested. And still, there would be this moment where the distance between what she was describing and where I was sitting felt larger than geography should have made it. I noticed it. I filed it away. I told myself it was normal. People grow. People bring new things home from new experiences. That is not a warning sign. That is just life. I believed that. I still believe it. But I wonder now if I should have said something in that 4th year. Not accusation, not confrontation, just acknowledgement. Just, I noticed something shifting. Do you feel it too? I didn't ask. And neither did she. And so the thing that was shifting just kept shifting, in silence, for another 3 years. I proposed in year 6. On a Tuesday. Not a special Tuesday. Not her birthday. Not an anniversary. Just a Tuesday in October when we were sitting on the floor of our apartment eating takeout, and she had sauce on her chin and was laughing at something on television, and I looked at her and thought, I want this exact version of this exact moment to keep existing. I didn't have the ring yet. I told her anyway. I said, I know I don't have a ring, and I know this is a floor and you have sauce on your chin, but I need you to know that I want to marry you. She stared at me, and then she put down her fork, and she said yes, without hesitation, without any of the doubt I would later learn had been building inside her. She said yes like she meant it, and she kissed me like she meant it, and we sat on that floor for another 2 hours talking about the future like it was a country we were planning to move to together. I bought the ring 4 months later. We got engaged on a Sunday, officially, in front of her parents. Her mother cried. Her father shook my hand again, and this time he held it a beat longer than a handshake usually lasts. The engagement was 18 months long. Not by design. We wanted a year, but the venue we loved had a waiting list. 18 months is a long time to be engaged. Long enough for everything to stay exciting and long enough for everything to settle into a new kind of ordinary. We were planning a wedding. And planning a wedding, I learned, is an exercise in confronting everything you have been politely not discussing. Where to live after, whether to combine finances or keep them separate. Children, how many, when, how important. Careers, whose would take priority if they ever conflicted. Where to spend holidays. All the questions that couples either answer or quietly agree to answer later, and later, and later, until later arrives and the answers are no longer optional. We handled most of it well. We had the conversations. Some of them were harder than others. There was one, about 6 months into the engagement, where we disagreed about where to live after the wedding. She wanted to stay in the city we were in. I had an opportunity to move for work that was significant enough that I had to take it seriously. We fought about it for 3 days. Real fighting, not bickering. The kind where you lie awake at night rewriting the argument in your head. Eventually, I turned down the opportunity. Not because she asked me to, not even because she pressured me to, but because when I weighed it, the relationship was worth more than the job. I told her that. She was grateful. She told me that meant everything to her. And I believed her. I still do. But I wonder now whether that decision and the weight of it and the gratitude she felt for it added something to the equation that was already becoming complicated. A debt she hadn't asked for. A sacrifice that made her feel, somewhere, the ground shifting beneath her. I wonder. Her friend Petra told me something, about 3 months before the Rome trip. We ran into each other by accident. Coffee shop, middle of the afternoon. I was working remotely. She sat down without asking and ordered something and looked at me with the expression of someone who has been waiting for an opportunity. Petra had known Mia for 12 years. Since before me. She liked me fine, but her first loyalty was and had always been to Mia, and I respected that. She's been distracted lately, Petra said. In what way? I asked. The kind of distracted that means something. You know how she gets when something is taking up space in her head. She goes quiet in the middle of sentences, like she started saying something and then redirected. I knew exactly how she got. I had been noticing it. Have you talked to her about it? I asked. Petra stirred her coffee. She says it's just wedding stress. You don't believe her. Petra looked at me directly. I think it might be wedding stress. But I think it might also be something bigger than that. And I think if it's the bigger thing, she's going to have to say it herself rather than have me push her toward it. So I'm telling you to check in with her. Really check in. Not the logistics check-in, not the vendor question check-in. The actual check-in. I drove home that afternoon thinking about Petra's face. I made dinner that night. I poured wine. I asked Mia, gently, specifically, how she was really feeling about everything. She looked at me with those steady eyes. Nervous, she said. But good nervous. The right kind. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. And maybe she believed herself. People are capable of lying to themselves for a very long time when the truth is a thing they are not ready to hold. The weeks after I got back from Rome were strange. Not terrible, just strange. The way a room feels the first time you walk into it after rearranging the furniture. Familiar in dimension but disorienting in detail because everything is where it shouldn't be. My apartment was mine alone again. She had moved in 2 years before the engagement. Now her things were still there, not all of them, but enough. And I moved around them the way you move around things you haven't decided what to do with yet. I packed them methodically over a week. Not in a rage, not in grief. Just with the steady attention of someone completing a necessary task. She came to collect them on a Saturday. We were civil. More than civil. Actually, we were kind to each other in a way that might have looked, to anyone watching, like two people who cared about each other and had simply arrived at an ending. which I suppose is exactly what we were. She stood in the doorway before she left, her last box in her arms. "You're going to be okay," she said. I looked at her. "I know," I said. "So are you." And I meant it. Both parts. My best friend is named Gabe. We've known each other since we were 19 years old. He was going to be my best man. He drove to see me the day after I got back from Rome. He didn't call first. He just showed up with a six-pack and a completely empty expression. The expression of someone who has prepared themselves to be present for whatever they find. I opened the door. He walked in. He set the beer on the table. He sat down. "Talk," he said. So I talked. For about 2 hours. Not crying, not performing, just talking. The dinner, the candles, the steadiness of her eyes, the drive home, the flight, my mother's voice on the phone at 1 a.m. When I was done, Gabe was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The thing about you that has always impressed me and also worried me is that you feel things completely, and then you organize them immediately into something manageable." I looked at him. "Is that a criticism?" "It's an observation," he said. "I'm saying, let it be unmanageable for a bit. You're allowed to not have this sorted." I thought about that. "I'll add it to the list," I said. He laughed. The kind of laugh that knows the person it's for. We drank the beer. We watched a football match that neither of us were particularly invested in. He stayed until midnight. When he left, he hugged me once, firmly, and said nothing, and that was exactly right. There was a question I kept circling back to in those early weeks. Not, why did this happen? Not, could it have been prevented? But what was real? 7 years is a significant portion of a life. 7 years of choosing someone, of organizing your world around their presence, of building the kind of intimacy that only comes from accumulated time. Was it real if it ended? Was it real if she had been uncertain for 8 months before she told me? Was it real if I had been noticing something shifting for years and choosing not to name it? I turned this over and over and over, and eventually I landed somewhere that felt honest. Yes, it was real. All of it. Her doubt did not retroactively erase the years before her doubt. My decision not to push on the things I noticed did not make those years a lie. It made them complicated, as most true things are. The love was real. The intentions were real. The problem was not that we were pretending. The problem was that we were growing in different directions at different speeds, and neither of us said it clearly enough until a restaurant in Rome made it impossible not to. There is a version of this story where I am the wrong party and she is the villain. I have no interest in that version. People are not villains for growing into themselves in ways that no longer fit the shape of what they promised. People are only villains when they are cruel about it. She was not cruel. She was, in the end, honest. Later than she should have been. Harder than it needed to be. But honest. And I would rather be left honestly than held on to dishonestly. Always. About 2 months after Rome, she called me. It was a Thursday evening. I almost didn't answer. Not because I was bitter, just because I wasn't sure what use the conversation would be to either of us. And I had gotten particular about protecting my own clarity in those weeks. But I answered. "I wanted to explain something," she said. "You don't owe me an explanation," I said. "I know. I want to give you one anyway." I sat down. "Okay." She took a breath. "The restlessness I felt, it wasn't about you. I need you to know that. It wasn't that I fell out of love with you or that you did something wrong. Not the future I had been building in my head for years. But myself. I came out of this with myself intact, which is not a small thing. There is a specific image I return to, sometimes, when I think about Rome. Not the dinner. Not her face across the candles. Not the walk back to the hotel in silence. The terrace, before dawn. The dark city spread out below me. Coffee cooling in my hands. The particular quality of quiet that exists in a place of great age and great beauty at 5 a.m, when the tourists and the traffic and the daily noise have not yet arrived. I sat there and I made decisions. Quietly. Without drama. I did not pace. I did not cry. I just sat and thought and let the city do what old cities do, which is remind you that you are not the first person to have your certainties rearranged by someone you loved, and you will not be the last, and the world continues to turn at exactly the same rate regardless. There is something clarifying about that. About being very small in a very old place when your life is reordering itself. Rome did not care about my engagement or my canceled wedding or the hollow feeling in my chest. Rome had its own centuries to attend to, and somehow that indifference was the most comforting thing in the world. It has been 8 months now since that dinner. 8 months since I raised that glass and meant every word. 8 months since I canceled the venue and the flowers and the photographer and the 47 other logistical pieces of a wedding about the terrace at 5 in the morning. About the email to the wedding planner and the call to my mother and the one-way flight home. I don't know if it was dignity, I said. I think I just wasn't willing to fall apart in Rome. Gabe smiled. Good city to keep it together in, he said. I have not been back to Rome. I don't think I will avoid it forever. It is too beautiful a city to surrender to a single memory. But not yet. There is a version of me, some future version, a few years from now, who will walk those same streets and eat at a counter in Trastevere and stand under the Pantheon and feel something new in all of it. The unopened bottle of Prosecco was still on ice when I left the hotel. I thought about it on the flight home. Couldn't decide if it was a sad detail or a funny one. Landed somewhere in between. I hope whoever cleaned the room drank it. I hope it was exactly cold enough. I hope it tasted like something worth celebrating.